Continued from the previous file. The only place for them is to retreat to the safety of the fantasy world of bears and squirrels. Page 17. Quote, "We will be together in our bear's cave and our squirrel's den, and we live on honey and nuts. Lots and lots of nuts, and we sing about ourselves." Unquote. At the end of the play, they are together, even they have nowhere to go. Osborne offers no solution for the situation he has created for Jimmy and Allison. The theme of alienation is emphasized in the last scene. Jimmy is left in despair, needing Allison's love, but unable to accept it. In his anguish, he cries out to her, quote, "I may be a lost cause, but I thought if you love me, it did not matter." Unquote. Allison understands that Jimmy needs something impossible for any woman to achieve, and certainly beyond the scope of a middle-class girl to whom he is drawn by his own insecurity and desire for revenge. The paradox is implied in the symbol of Cleopatra and Boswell. She further knows that the terms of Jimmy will lead further to cruelties and erosions. Allison's decision to join him in the pit, though on equal terms now, can only give them a temporary respite. The final image of hell reinforces the sense that they both know that there is no escape. Images of hell and purgatory appear frequently in the play. The image of bears and squirrels is not whimsical tag, but a serious way of stating what the whole pattern of the play is made clear. For Jimmy and Allison, the process of erosion is inevitable, and the root of the process is in the disease of the time. Quote, "Poor squirrels, ... oh poor, poor bears." Unquote. Thus, the modern life is confused and cruel, unlovely and self-destructive. Jimmy and Allison have been the victims of this modern restlessness and sufferings. Question 6. Discuss the roles and characters of Helena, Cliff and Redfern in the play Look Back in Anger. Is the play a one-man show? Answer. Look Back in Anger is dominated by a series of obsessional dramatic monologues of Jimmy Porter. Jimmy looks back in anger at a past which he regrets, since it embodied moral certitude and idealism, and he looks forward to a possible better future. He is trapped between a past from which he cannot escape and a future which he cannot accept. There is a strongly nostalgic quality in much of his response. He thinks of his father and his mother's guilt. His frustration with his wife, belonging to the upper class, stems from his feeling of present restlessness. He sees the future as becoming dominated by a soulless technological vision. Thus, Jimmy is obsessed with the past because he finds the present intolerable and the future bleak. Page 18. It is the angry outburst and tyranny of Jimmy that form the major part of the play. The question therefore turns on the extent to which the characters are realized in and through stage action. Allison certainly develops considerably as a character, and the need that she and Jimmy have for one another is clearly shown to affect Jimmy as much as her by the time we arrive at Act 3. Allison leaves Jimmy, but she returns to him because she knows that Jimmy requires some kind of relief which she can offer, although she cannot give the entire satisfaction because Jimmy needs something almost impossible for any single woman to achieve. Thus, Allison as a character is not a mere figure. She makes several significant choices which shape the action of the play. First, when she chooses to leave, and secondly, when she returns. Ellison knows that the socially, intellectual, personal differences between them make it impossible for establishing a viable relationship. Jimmy is searching for a womb-like retreat and yet is driven to anger by the woman who offers it to him. All that Ellison or any woman can offer Jimmy is sexual love and an image of comfort, and Jimmy will hate her even while he self-destructively demands the security of her love. Ellison realizes that Jimmy needs some impossible amalgam of mother, love, and intellectual companion. This awareness of the problems in the relationship on the part of Ellison shows the real problem of Jimmy and the cause of Jimmy's anger. Jimmy's anger is indeed personal rather than social. It is not rooted in class hatred, as some critics have pointed out. The scene with her father draws attention to the fact that Jimmy and she are in a relationship which has been created by the two of them. Ellison is partly guilty of, quote, sitting on the fence, unquote. She leaves Jimmy to Helena. By the end of the play, she and Jimmy are shown to be locked in a very complex personal relationship which has fundamentally altered both of them. Ellison has been forced to accept the loss of her assured values, and Jimmy has been forced to face the cost in personal terms of his desire for an absolute commitment to honesty and moral openness. Cliff is a character who has a significant role in the action. His obvious role is to act as a buffer between Jimmy and Ellison. He is clearly unable to survive without other people and yet finds it difficult to form relationship. In Act 1, Scene 1, during the battles between Jimmy and Ellison, Cliff acts as a sounding board and a restraint on the excesses of Jimmy's outbursts. The antagonism between Jimmy and Ellison is mitigated by the presence of Cliff. Page 19. His role culminates when the mock struggle between Jimmy and Ellison causes an accident in which Ellison's hand is burnt. Cliff is a warm and affectionate person, but the indications of a deep insecurity are clearly delineated. Cliff is left alone in Act 2, Scene 1 with the two women. Cliff explains to Helena and perhaps to Ellison what his role has been in the relationship. Helena has suspected the affectionate and non-sexual relationship between Cliff and Ellison, but Cliff explains the relationship. His decision to leave in Act 3, Scene 1 shows that he has been changed in course of the play. His leaving is a form of retreat, and we feel that as a result of his exposure to Jimmy and others, he has been made more conscious. In Act 3, Scene 1, a struggle ensues between Jimmy and Cliff, which parallels the struggle in Act 1. Cliff announces his desire to leave because of his sense of purposelessness. Cliff's departure enhances the intellectual desolation of Jimmy. Cliff is indeed an important character because it is through his conscious reactions much of the action is to follow. Helena and Redfern are less complex characters, yet even they are shown to be integrated into the main choice which Jimmy's monologues pose. Quote, the choice of how to survive in a world whose values are in turmoil. Unquote. Helena enters in Act 1, Scene 1. The long conversations with Helena in Act 2, Scene 1 is used to allow Ellison to tell the audience about the game of squirrels and bears which she and Jimmy play to escape the intolerable strains and contradictions of the relationship. In the end of Act 2, Helena realizes that she must accept the challenge that Jimmy embodies. Helena is the self-destruction which Jimmy seeks. There is no tenderness in their relationship. Their passion is only an aspect of their enmity. Helena is locked out of the process of self-destruction, which is the only route open to Jimmy. Helena is a realist who survives by deliberately restricting the range of emotions she would allow to affect her. But Helena performs an important function because she combines the two attitudes: educated loyalty to truth and sentimental longing for a lost world of ideals. She is a modern intellectual, but not dispossessed of her identity. Jimmy's attack on her sentimental Christianity is very self-revealing. Jimmy is as much of a sentimental snob as Helena is. Even his snobbery is inverted. Colonel Redfern serves to emphasize that much of words that Jimmy asserts has happened to the present, that it has lost its direction. Jimmy is attuned to the spirit of Redfern because Redfern represents, page 20, represents the past values. Like Redfern, Jimmy survives by idealizing the past, by creating defensive pockets of memory to which he can retire when the emptiness of his present and the desolation of his future becomes too much to bear. Like Colonel Redfern, hovering on the brink of nostalgia, Jimmy is repeating the old stories of an idealized past. Redfern's regret for the lost values certainly draws attention to the element of nostalgia in Jimmy's cry that, quote, "there are no good brave causes left," unquote. Although the play centers on the angry speeches of Jimmy, the questions they pause on the other characters serve to create a rich pattern of reactions which deepen the effect on the audience. Moreover, they are dramatically important to bring about and heighten the problem of Jimmy's alienation and a sense of emptiness because of false relationship and false values of modern society. Question 7. Write a note on the character of Allison. Explain her detachment and unresponsiveness to which Jimmy rebukes her. Answer. Allison is described by the author as, quote, "the most elusive personality," unquote. She is tall, slim and dark. She has eyes which are large and deep. Allison's detachment. Allison belongs to the upper class while Jimmy belongs to the working class. She stands for Victorian morality and so remains a virgin till her marriage with Jimmy. Jimmy taunts her for it. According to Osborne, quote, "she is turned in a different key, a key of well-bred malaise that is often drowned in the robust orchestration of the other two," unquote. She is quiet and well-bred and so remains detached when Jimmy hurls abuses at her. She irritates Jimmy more by being not provoked by her abuse. Quote, "Allison withdraws behind a facade of detached indifference," unquote. In bracket, Kathleen J. Worth, bracket closed. Jimmy's habits annoy her. For instance, she feels annoyed when he plays on the trumpet. She does not like Jimmy's abusive remarks about her parents and family and his attitude to Cliff. Yet she remains quiet, although at heart she is hurt. She tells Cliff that she can no longer bear the way Jimmy keeps on behaving towards her. But she does not react till Helena comes. Helena persuades her to leave Jimmy. Her detachment and apathy are castigated by Jimmy in powerful language. He interprets it as a lack of life, spirit and personality. Jimmy calls her quote, Lady Pusillanimous, unquote, sarcastically. It has been suggested that her detachment is not simple an indication of tolerance and acceptance. It may suggest a superior, page 21, attitude towards her working class husband. Martin Bentham says, quote, toleration of him seems rather like the patronage with which society has given him a white-tile education, pretensions to usefulness, unquote. Allison's estimate of Jimmy's character. Allison cannot understand the complexity of Jimmy's character. She says to Helena that she does not believe Jimmy to be right in his attitude to life. Jimmy demands allegiance not only to himself but also to those who are dear to him. It is what he would call a question of allegiance. He expects you to be liberal about them, not only about himself and all the things he believes in, his present and his future, but his past as well. Allison advises Helena not to take away Jimmy's sufferings from him because without his sense of suffering, he would feel lost. She tells her father that Jimmy marries her for taking revenge on the upper class. She calls Jimmy a spiritual barbarian who has thrown a challenge to her by marrying her. He does not understand the feeling of others and is not sympathetic to anyone. This estimate of Jimmy's character is not true. Jimmy is full of grief over the death of Mrs. Tanner, and he is sensitive to his own sense of loneliness, which expresses itself in paradoxical dynamics. Allison is right in her view that Jimmy cannot be satisfied with any woman. She tells Helena, quote, he wants something quite different from us. What it is exactly I don't know. A kind of cross between a mother and a Greek courtesan, a wench woman, a mixture of Cleopatra and Boswell, unquote. Jimmy and Allison's relationship. Allison falls in love with Jimmy because he is so very different from other young men. Quote, well, for 20 years I had lived a happy, uncomplicated life, and suddenly this spiritual barbarian throws down the gauntlet at me, unquote. It was a challenge to her. She finds his demands, opinions and behavior quite incompatible with her way of life. She cannot accept his permissive sexual code. She cannot accept his demand to remain loyal to Madeline and his other former mistresses. She cannot separate herself from her parents. She has an ambiguous attitude to Jimmy. She cannot like Jimmy's ways and Jimmy's abuses. Still, she is tied to him. She enjoys when, quote, Cliff gives him a tug and Jimmy falls to the door, unquote. There is a part of Allison's mind which resists Jimmy's ways. Still, she likes and admires Jimmy. Jimmy's, quote, cherry red shirt, unquote, that she wears indicates that she tries to emulate her husband. A few months after deserting her husband, Allison returns to her husband. This explains that she loves him in spite of all the hardships. Page 22. Hardships of relationship. Jimmy and Allison are unlike each other in their social standing, ways of life, belief and temperament, but there exists sexual harmony between them. Jimmy was drawn to her by what seemed her, quote, wonderful relaxation of spirit, unquote. Jimmy can satisfy his passion with her, although he calls her a python. Allison hesitates to tell him about her pregnancy because she feels that he would suspect her motives and would dislike her for her bigger belly. But the two can escape from reality by playing the bear-squirrel game. quote, playful, careless creatures in their own cozy zoo for two, unquote. Question 8. What is Allison's estimate of Jimmy's character? How far is this true? Answer. See answer to question number 7, bracket, subtitles, Allison's estimate of Jimmy's character, bracket close. Question 9. Indicate Jimmy-Allison relationship. Do you think that Allison does not love Jimmy? Answer. Seek answer to question number 7, bracket, subtitle, Jimmy-Allison relationship, bracket closed. Question 10. Indicate the significance of Allison-Cliff relationship in the play. Answer. Cliff is a friend of Jimmy and lives in the same flat with Jimmy and Allison. He is again an associate of Jimmy in his business, that is, in the running of sweet stall. Cliff is important as a buffer between Jimmy and Allison. He is acceptable both to Allison as he is to Jimmy. Cliff and Allison are affectionate to each other. Cliff often tries to mitigate the despair of Jimmy by humor. Quote, well, shall we dance? Unquote. When Jimmy uses a vulgar language, quote, only in the mating season, unquote, Cliff asks him to apologize. When Allison is hurt in the struggle between the two men, Cliff offers her sympathy and Jimmy expresses regret. Cliff applies the soap over the burn and the two are locked in loving embrace. He massages the back of her neck and she lets her head fall forward. Allison is just like a little girl and Cliff assumes the role of father. Allison finds sympathetic and understanding companionship in Cliff. Allison and Cliff are dependent on each other. Cliff says, quote, I don't think I would have the courage to live on my own again in spite of everything, unquote. Cliff seeks to put a bandage on the burn and there is a very intimate physical and emotional relationship. Allison asks if he will leave them. Cliff assures her of his stay and support. She confesses to him that she is pregnant, a fact which she has concealed from her husband. Thus there is complete reliance on Cliff. He is her friend and confidant. Cliff is very close to Allison. He kisses and hugs her because she needs his protection. Page 23. There is, however, no sexual relationship between the two. Helena mistakes their friendship for sexual intimacy. Allison tells her, quote, we are simply fond of each other. There is no more to it than that, unquote. Helena replies, quote, darling, really? It can't be as simple as that, unquote. Allison confesses, quote, you mean there must be something physical too? I suppose there is, but it's not exactly a consuming passion with either of us, unquote. Helena suspects that Allison's pregnancy is due to her relationship with Cliff. Allison allays her suspicion. Quote, oh, it's his all right. There could not be any doubt of that. I have never really wanted anyone else, unquote. Cliff has an affectionate, understanding relationship with Allison rather than physical relationship. Allison is a contrast to Helena. Helena will contract a passion for Jimmy and will be her mistress. Allison holds dear her Victorian values and will not swerve from sexual morality in spite of close affectionate relationship with Cliff. Jimmy may taunt them for their intimate relationship and calls Cliff a randy, but he values his friendship. Cliff and Allison show restraint and prove the assertion of Jimmy, quote, no one can raise themselves out of their delicious sloth, unquote. Cliff shows tenderness and love for Allison, which Jimmy possesses but is unable to express in a direct way. Question 11. Write a note on the character of Helena. Answer. Helena is an important character for her influence on the life of Jimmy. In contrast with Allison, Helena is a vibrant and forceful personality. She tries to put Jimmy in his place soon after her arrival. When Jimmy hears that Helena is coming to stay with them, he asks Allison if that witch whom he regards as his quote, natural enemy unquote, is bringing her armor with her to protect herself against his attacks. But Helena has a great hold over Allison. She criticizes Jimmy and describes him as a real savage. After observing Jimmy's habitual ill treatment of Allison, Helena begins to work upon Allison's mind and urges her to settle once for all the relationship between her and Jimmy. She points out that she cannot live in this way when Allison will have a baby. According to Helena, Jimmy does not seem to know what love or anything means. At the tea table, Helena asks Jimmy why he is so unpleasant and offensive. She rebukes Jimmy for denouncing Allison's mother, and Helena even goes to the extent of slapping Jimmy when the latter admonishes Helena. There is a verbal skirmish between Jimmy and Helena. It is a matter of fact that influence of Helena makes Allison leave the house. Helena, however, stays back when Allison leaves the flat with her father. Continued in the next file.